welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Kristen Sosulski. I'm a professor of information systems at NYU Stern. Do we have any alumni or NYU students in the audience? All right. Well, great to see you here. And I'm also the director of the W.R. Berkley Innovation Lab, which is a lab at NYU Stern that focuses on entrepreneurship, innovation, and education. So I manage the education group there. And so my background is in both information systems and also education. And you'll see from my talk today that those two areas of expertise kind of come together when I'm talking about the role of the future, really, business analyst, right? So we're looking at what's on the screen here, the future of business intelligence. And I'm going to argue that the future of business intelligence really has to do with the future business analysts. Okay. So, so the question is, why is data visualization so popular today? And why is this room filled with folks to study and learn more about the topic? And it really has to do with the influx, the availability of more and more data, the veracity of it, the velocity of it, the volume, and this really creates challenges for lay people to really make sense of the data that they're seeing and interacting with and working with. So obviously we're in this world of big data. And if you just think about it from your own perspective about how much data you share every single day, it's amazing. Just searching, shopping, connecting, contributing. Everybody's on their laptops and phones now. So we've excelled at collecting data and generating it. But now, what can we do with it? So we have to create a situation where we can make this data easier to act upon, right? And the classic argument is, well, how do we get there? Data visualization is going to be our solution, right? Because we need to communicate to other people, we need to share those insights, and do that in an efficient way and a very quick way. So, but data visualization in itself isn't the solution, and we all know that. It's really about the visual communication. So when we heard about from Scott earlier today, he talked about visual communication as an essential skill for managers today, which is very much true. And those are the people that I teach in my classes, right? So I teach data visualization at NYU Stern to MBAs, to executives, and to undergraduates. And the skills that they need not only have to come with the toolkit itself and the analysis and models, which are really good at teaching, but also these other elements that I'm going to share with you. Because it's really a process of transforming data into information, right? So disconnected facts and figures and numbers into information that kind of makes sense, into knowledge that can eventually be these insights that we can make decisions based upon and learn from and become smarter. So we know the affordances of this medium allows us to do a lot of things. Quite frankly, right, to present history, to reveal intelligent insights specifically about the past. So that's your typical reporting objective with visualization. To describe what's happening now. So this is your business intelligence focus, your dashboards, right? What's happening in the moment now. So you can make timely decisions about the present. And finally, for prediction, to predict trends and behaviors for the future. It also is another area that I've been arguing for in a lot of my work is that it's really become the interface of the 21st century, right? For us to interface and interact with data and to view it in ways that are just easy. And for different types of analyses that the technology now allows for based on, say, location, based on context. We heard a little bit about context today, just in the previous talk, so important, and person-centered analysis of behaviors. But we need to do all of this really efficiently and effectively. And we know that spreadsheets alone really don't tell us that much, right? And we can encode many values at once from a spreadsheet, like a whole column of data can be encoded into a simple line, right? And this is one of the really affordances of data visualization. I could perceive many values at once instead of in a single line, in a single graphic. However, I have a quote up here. I won't read it out to you, but visualizations are still not as effective as they can be. That's what the research is telling us, right? And that's why we're learning new techniques and new technologies and new models, but they're still not there yet. We still don't have the perfect dashboard that allows us to see those insights that we really need to see to do our job most effectively. So this is the big challenge. I found this quote, which I put the author's name there. But we're melding all these different fields together, right? So as visualization designers, we're expected to be statisticians, we're expected to be computer scientists, information designers, artists. And so that's a big ask. And so when we hear that visualization should be part of the work that everyone does in an organization, you kind of have to think about all the different skills that are required for that and how challenging that is. Because we know that everyone loves pictures, and pictures are worth 1,000 words, supposedly. But not all of them have these characteristics that I have listed up here. And especially being interpretable or something that you can take action on, relevant, meaningful. And this is the real big challenge that we're in. We can create the pictures, we can learn the technology, we can learn the models, but there's still a piece missing for that business analyst to have something that's meaningful for their work. So in my work and in my courses, I use use cases. And use cases help me communicate to the students how to go beyond these models and just technology. Because they want to learn we learn R Studio, Tableau, all the great technology packages. But how do we get to the point of creating something that really has value? So I'm going to argue that there's 3 other ingredients to the models plus technology, and they're understanding our audience, the design piece, and delivery. I'm going to speak to those 3 today. So first, with our audience. So it's always hard to understand exactly who your audience is, but if we just take it back to a human level, we heard from the speaker before this one talking about some human perception principles and those things that are super important, how we perceive color, how we perceive objects, and having a real deep understanding of that will go a really long way in creating visualizations. So understanding that humans have dual channels for processing information, right, orally and visually, okay, and respecting those, not trying to overload those at once. Understanding that we have a limited capacity in those channels for processing information. And then finally, that we actively process incoming information, and we integrate that incoming information with prior knowledge. And so we really want to draw on the prior knowledge and the prior experience of our audience. So guess what? So they remember and learn the things that we're telling them and that we're showing them. So how do we create visualizations and narratives that facilitate that? And these are the tenets of multimedia learning theory and the human information processing system. For instance, what do we see here? It may look like a rose. And why am I showing you a rose? Because I want you to buy me flowers after? No, because I'm going to ask you to find the dolphin in the rose. You can see it's kind of up there. And these kinds of, does everybody see the dolphin in the rose up there? If I have the pointer, there you go. Okay. And these are the kinds of things that we study in my class, and the reason why is to really show you that you weren't expecting to see a dolphin in the rose. So when you're creating a visualization, just because it has all the data and it's in there, like those pie charts and bar charts we saw in the previous presentation with the different colors and how the bar chart was so much easier to perceive, that there's a trend going up or down. The same thing here. You don't want to be the dolphin in the rose. You don't want your visualization to be that. So if that's one takeaway that you have today, think about the dolphin in the rose. So there's some techniques that I can quickly share with you that help so you're not the dolphin in the rose when you're creating your visualizations, so that the users can actually perceive the information that you are trying to communicate. So first is, I just want to contextualize and mention that I'm talking about presenter-driven presentations with visualizations with these recommendations. But remember, visualizations can also be audience or user-driven, right? So if you think of like a BI dashboard, business intelligence dashboard, or a website, we're expecting users to kind of navigate, find their own narrative or story or information, different techniques that you would use there. But I'll just give you a few for presenter-driven ones. So one is through annotation, and the other one is through animation. And these are things that are not used enough. With simple PowerPoint tools, we can make our visualizations pop. We don't even have to use the latest and greatest tools. But when we're trying to tell a story or communicate an insight and use a visualization as evidence to do that, we can do it a lot better with animation and annotation. So one is to reserve the use of color for things that are important. Don't highlight every bar of your bar graph. Just highlight the one that's important, okay? If it's categorical data, which is probably what you're showing in a bar graph, you don't need to color the categorical data. Labeling them is enough, right? And so let's say that the last bar is the most important, and you want to highlight that to the audience. Form is that we can use form a lot differently. So if we have a plot, we can use a different shape to distinguish one data point from another. And movement, so we can show change over time. Instead of showing our whole time series data plot like on one screen, we can actually show it move over time. And we can slow it down and speed it up and add our narration to that, so it flows very nicely. So you're not just expected to perceive all the data over time at once. Could be overwhelming, and then it might not be clear what eyes the presenter would want you to look at. And so the things I'm showing you are called pre-attentive attributes, things that you can perceive right away and you don't have to think about. Spatial position, so you know when you see a scatter plot and you see an outlier, obviously that's saying something to you. And that's really where the data is revealing itself. If you want a data point to stand out, just highlight it. For instance, like you see on the screen there, but you want to just be aware that you don't highlight everyone, which can be an issue. Progressively reveal content. Don't think that you have to show everything at once. You can use techniques of panning and zooming with visualizations, even in a presentation. And also for showing time series data, you don't have to show, you can show it in many different ways using the animation. You can show how a certain point changes over time by having it highlight and then move over time. So those were a few things, again, and those are really for presenter-driven. But think about what you'd use for user-driven storytelling or visualizations that you provide in a report. Would you provide the whole thing? Would you annotate it? What kind of text would you add to it to make it meaningful and so to ensure that the user really understands? So the previous slide was my second point about design. So we want to make sure that we're designing for comprehension and retention. So that's basically understanding, okay, and remembering. Very important. Sometimes we forget that. We do all this work to create these beautiful displays, and no one knows what they're saying. And that's really a shame. And so we have to take that extra step. Not just make it look fantastic, but make sure that insight is really coming through. And that if you literally have to write it down on top of the slide and inside the report, that's better than just expecting that your audience knows what they should be seeing. Because it's a translation process, right? So we're going from the real world, we have some real world phenomena, we have data that represents that phenomena, and then we're encoding into shapes and colors. So think about that kind of translation process. And these are things that probably most of you are familiar with, all the different design principles. These are the top 10 that I've picked out that are really important, and these come from many different scholars in the visualization community, like Edward Tufte, Donna Wong, Nathan Yao, Casey Race, and many, many others. But these are the top 10, so you can just look these up. And I also have a pamphlet at the end. If you want to tweet at me, I can send it to you that explains these. And so these are things that we really emphasize to business analysts to ensure that they're not creating visualizations that have too much non-data elements, it's called, so too much decoration, essentially. And then finally, my last point about what I feel that business analysts need in order to be great visualization designers and communicators of data is around delivery. And this is something that not a lot of people talk about all that much, but I think it's super important. So first, you want to think about, is your visualization being projected, or is it on paper, or is it on a screen, like your phone screen or something? That's super important because you should design to ensure that it looks great on whatever platform that it's being displayed on. So for instance, sometimes we saw some displays that have colors that are very similar, and we have to make sure that, some people are colorblind, they might not be able to distinguish between red and blue, for instance, and then when you print it out, it looks all grayscale. So those are just some considerations just to be thoughtful to your audience, because again, you're making it for them. The second point about the delivery is it going to be something that's going to be animated? Is it going to be interactive? So if you're designing something that's web-based, are you going to add interactive elements to it? And how do you design to promote and facilitate interactivity for your audience? Or is it just a static display? So those are some considerations there. And then finally, thinking about the designer or the business analyst in addition to the visualization. So what's their role? Are they going to narrate, to describe what you should be looking at? They're going to progressively reveal content and different data points to have their point come across. Is there going to be written text with the visualization, let's say if it's on a report? Or if the business analyst is actually presenting, what are they saying that's not on the screen that complements the visualization? So I don't know if these were things that you thought of before in terms of the future of business intelligence with data visualization, but bringing these skills up to the level of technology skills that we have and affordances that we have today are super critical. Because as technology advances, it's going to get better and better, but the things that need to be incorporated along with that understanding of those models, the understanding of the different techniques has to be, how do we actually convey those to non-experts? And that's really important aspect. So bringing those 5 pieces together is where I feel the future of business intelligence is with data visualization. So thanks so much. I have some time for Q&A, and if you want to send me a tweet, I have a guide, a little cheat sheet that goes over a lot of design principles that I mentioned as that second area that we really want to focus on as visualization designers to think about. So thanks so much, and I think I have a few minutes for questions. Yeah.
Hey, I really enjoyed your talk in general. I just wanted to make a comment and hear your feedback on it. You said at one point that you recommended not coloring different categories differently, and I think you qualified that by saying, like, in some cases, like, only one category is important and the rest aren't. And I've found that when there's some ambiguity in that, it's actually better to color the categories differently and make them different forms. Like, put as many differences as possible to, like, draw home the point. And, like, I don't know, I've just found that really helpful. I'm wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I wasn't saying exclusively that the other categories weren't important, but if there is one in a bar chart, for instance, that was important, highlight that one. And if you use a different color for each bar, it looks like everyone is highlighted, so you're not really sure where to focus your attention on. And then that's one thing. The second thing is that we have this issue of redundant labeling. So now I've labeled each bar, and maybe I even put the value on each bar, and I might have an X and Y axis, an X-axis that has the scale on it, which is another redundant label. And now I have a legend with 6 different colors that match my bars. And I might not need that extra encoding there for the bar in terms of color if I've already labeled it on the Y-axis, for instance. And then I lose the opportunity to point out one that might be important when I used multiple colors. Okay, and because the colors really don't have any extra meaning. Okay, if you think about it, right? So if I have a category and I label it, apples, oranges, and pears, why should I label color apples red and pears green and oranges orange? It doesn't really add that much. It's like decoration in that case. Other questions? Hi. So this is where the use cases come in that I mentioned I teach in my class. So we can use visualization for communication, for revealing insights to each other, collaboration, but when you're using it for exploration, that's a totally different ballgame, right? And there you're not maybe necessarily showing it to anybody, but you're really, and so if the bars are all different colors, you don't really care because you can, interpret what that means. But you could save yourself some time by just having those principles applied in your visualization using your templates or your CSS or what have you. But it's a really good point, and that has to go, again, with the use cases. When you're using it for exploration, you're really using the tools, and I find that more in the data analysis phase, okay, rather than the presentation phase. Great point. I'm really glad you brought that up.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I'm very interested in your use cases precisely. Where do you get them? Do you get data sets and you come up with a question? Do you inspire, where do you get your like mock data or like real business cases that like from like a teaching perspective and a business perspective? I'm really interested in that.
That's a great question. So where I develop my use cases are in situ, so in real situations. So I consult for companies on data visualization. All my students are studying business analytics. So at Stern, we have a Master's of Science in Business Analytics, and it's in our 5th year now. So I have 300 to 400 students that I work with, and they're really excited about it. And we talk, and they share their data with me and their visualizations. And so that's really one way that I get a lot of examples of these different use cases. But I try to divide them in those two categories of whether it's something that's for communication or if it's for exploration. Yeah. Of course. Oh, no. We make sure that that the students would sign a non-disclosure. Yep. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Thank you for your attention. Take care.